Hello and welcome everybody to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be going over how to use a basic SWR and power meter. If you're new to ham radio, it's extremely useful to know how to use one of these devices so you can see how much power you're transmitting and also see the SWR of your antenna system. If you want to take a shot at building your own antennas, it's extremely useful to be able to measure the SWR of those antennas that you create. Okay, so here we have a really basic meter. This is an astatic SWR and power meter, PDC, Papa Delta Charlie 2. And I just bought this a while ago, probably 2 years ago on Amazon, if I remember correctly, for about $30, so it's not that expensive. This also comes with a built-in RF field meter, field strength meter. With a little antenna that screws in here, but I misplaced that, so we're not going to go over that today. So really simply, we have the transmit side and we have the antenna side. So your radio is going to be hooked up to this coax connection here, and your antenna is going to be hooked up to this one here. And now the part that confuses most people is this calibration knob here. And what we want to do is to be able to calibrate our SWR so that we have a reference point that we can base all of this off of. Notice here for our power scale we have 10 watts and 100 watts. That corresponds to this power scale here, so it goes 0 through 10. So on the 10 watt scale that would be 0 watts and that would be 10 watts. On the 100 watt scale this would be 0 watts, 10 watts, 20 watts, 40, 60, 80, and 100. And then we also have a button here for forward and reflected power. Okay? One thing I forgot to mention that's very important is that you want to make sure that the pieces of test equipment and the connectors you're using are all rated for the frequency on which you're going to be doing your testing. In this case we're testing in the VHF range, and I know from reading the manual that this is meant to operate in the VHF range. And again, if we look at the dummy load on the front here, we see that it's good. It will present a 50 ohm impedance from 1 to 650 megahertz, and all the coax I'm using and the connectors I'm using are rated for at least VHF frequencies. Okay, so I went ahead and hooked up my dummy load to the antenna side of my SWR meter and my portable VHF radio to the left-hand side of my SWR meter. What we want to do is we want to set the switch to forward position, and the scale will set it to 10 watts because the radio we're using puts out about 5 watts or so. So we'll go ahead and key up the radio, and as you can see on the left we're getting about 4 to 6 watts, which makes sense. And on the right we see that the needle is pegged right out to the right side of the scale, and what we want to do is we'll use that calibrate knob I was talking about, and we're going to put it to the set position, just like that. We'll unkey the radio, and then we'll go to reflected power. And now as you can see, our power reading hasn't changed. We're still getting about 5 watts, and we're getting an SWR of slightly above 1, which is great. As you can see on this meter, anything above 3 is considered bad. And we're right in that range between 1.5 and 1. And so that's how you use a SWR power meter. This setup is pretty typical. I've seen old Heathkit SWR power meters that work exactly the same way. You're pretty much always going to see this calibration knob unless it's an electronic unit that measures it digitally, in which case it does its own self-calibration, or it will have instructions for how to calibrate it.